This is Talk Sport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. We've got an awful lot of calls to take, an awful lot of opinions coming in on foreign ownership, on Vincent Tan, and on what the difference is between one eccentric billionaire owner of a football club and another, for heaven's sake. And talk about eccentricity, I've got the ultimate eccentric in the studio with me right now, Mr. Mike Porky Parry. Very good morning to you.
A very good morning to you, Mike. I will ignore that taunt because obviously you're trying to wind me up. You want me to say something which is exceptional and perhaps a little out of order, but I'm not going to be tempted to reply to your rather insulting language with a rebuke about your weight, your lifestyle, your deadbeat dad approach to life, or anything like that.
Well, eccentric to me is not an insult. I think eccentric, if somebody described me as eccentric, I'd be quite happy. I wouldn't be at all upset.
Well, you had a very eccentric father, God rest his soul. And
he was definitely eccentric.
Any man who decides to leave a party in the middle of Manhattan and walk to John F. Kennedy Airport, which is the equivalent of leaving central London and walking to Heathrow, has to have sort of organisational in-the-head issues.
Yes, indeed, especially when there wasn't a flight going that night, but that's a long story that we'll tell for another time. Now, let's talk about Vincent Tan and Malky Mackay and the whole issue of foreign ownership, because, as I was saying, there's only 8 English teams that can properly call themselves English-owned in the Premier League, and one of them, of course, is your beloved Everton.
Yeah, Everton is wholly English-owned. I mean, Mr. Bill Kenwright, by the way, what about that story about the theatre tonight? Just talking about Mr. Kenwright,
absolutely awful.
Who's the world's biggest theatre impresario, but the Apollo Theatre of Shaftesbury Avenue, suddenly the ceiling caves in on the people sitting there.
It's incredible that so far it would seem nobody's actually been killed.
No.
There's a few serious injuries, but it's a miracle in a way.
But I mean, a bit of a shock that when you're settling down with the popcorn and all that kind of stuff, and then there's a bit of a noise, bang, the roof falls in on you. That's a popular expression, isn't it? The roof fell in, but in fact, the roof did fall in. Anyway, we digress. Mr. Kenwright is the owner of Everton Football Club, so unlike Spurs, he's not the chairman employed by the owner. He's the owner and the chairman. You see
and
what
also,
I mean?
he's unlike Joe Lewis, who lives in the Bahamas, who's a non-dom, as we call them in sort of political terms, because he doesn't live here. He's a tax exile, effectively. So I call Tottenham a foreign team.
Well, I don't. I call him a British team. Mr. Levy, as I understand it, owns 24% of one of the companies that he's owned by.
But they're all offshore companies, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know the business structure of it. But
well, Joe Lewis lives in the Bahamas. Why do you think he lives there? Do you think he likes the sunshine?
No, it's because we have such punitive taxes in this country on entrepreneurs who create wealth that people go and live abroad. I don't blame them.
Well, why doesn't Bill Kenwright live abroad?
Well, Mr. Kenwright's business is largely based around the West End Theatre here in London and in provincial theatres around Britain.
Well, yeah, but he could base himself in the Bahamas if he wanted to avoid paying tax.
Yes, he could. But he is a very loyal Britisher.
Right.
He's very loyal to his roots on Merseyside. That's the heritage and the culture of what he's all about, and I could never see him moving abroad.
So Joe Lewis isn't then?
Well, I don't know Mr. Lewis. I've never met him, but I've met Mr. Kenwright quite a few times. And
what I'm saying is that Bill Kenwright is genuinely a British owner. He lives in Britain. Yeah. He pays his taxes here. Joe Lewis isn't like that, so I call them a foreign team.
Well, I don't think they're a foreign team. I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody, as I say, who's very British and successful in business, wanting to stay abroad. But the difference is, Mike, this. Never mind Mr. Levy. Mr. Levy's incidental. Mr. Levy's a hired hand to all intents and purposes, although he does have a stake in the company that owns Spurs. Yeah. But the point I'm making is this. Mr. Lewis is the owner of Spurs, but as you quite rightly say, is exiled abroad. Now, he then employs a chairman, Mr. Levy, who goes around appointing managers on an average every 24 months. So every 2 years there's a new manager. So you have to say to yourself, because Mr. Kenwright actually lives in this country, spends 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, looking after the affairs of Everton Football Club, they could get by with one manager every 11 years who was eminently more successful than any of the managers that Mr. Levy's ever appointed, except for Harry Redknapp. And they sacked him because he was the most successful of the lot.
Since when did David Moyes was described as a successful manager? He didn't win anything. He's even admitted it now. He says, I'd love to win a trophy. I'm now at a club where I can win a trophy.
David Moyes was very successful in the sense that
I don't think you can define success by not winning anything.
Well, you can, because considering the resources he had to work with... You might as well
call Eddie the Eagle a success.
No. Considering the resources he had to get on with life at Everton, we haven't got any money at Everton because we don't have a billionaire overseas owner. Now, there's a faction at Everton who would very much like Mr. Kenwright to go to the market and borrow 150 million quid, a bit like Leeds United did, a bit like Portsmouth did, and all that kind of stuff, and bankrupt the club.
And bring a sort of partner in, as it were.
Well, no, Bill's always looking, Mr. Kenwright's always looking for a partner. He's always looking for somebody to... In fact, he would sell the club
maybe
tomorrow.
Maybe he could have got into business with Vincent Tan.
No, well, I mean, that's another story, isn't it? Now, Vincent Tan... You see, what I find really odd about the Vincent Tan situation, apart from the fact that his behaviour is extraordinary...
He's eccentric.
Yes, he's eccentric, and he's a successful businessman, and sometimes successful businessmen think they rule the world, or have the right to. But the one thing I don't understand, Mark, and by the way, getting back to Mr. Levy for a minute, John Dillon in the Daily Express this morning is writing a piece that I've been banging on about for weeks, and that is that... Is Mr. Levy really qualified to be the chairman of a football club?
It's a good question.
Because he keeps appointing managers on. You've got to see they're going after another foreign manager, Frank de Boer. You could have guessed that. You could have guessed that immediately. For Mr. Levy, an English manager with an English-sounding name is nowhere near exotic enough for Spurs. So get somebody from... If I was the manager...
You'd think he would have learned his lesson with AVB, wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course you would. And if I was the manager of Ajax anyway... 4 times European Cup winners? Is it 4 times?
Yeah, a long time ago, though.
Well, no, not that long ago. They won 3 European Cups in successive years during the Cruyff era.
Yeah, well, how long ago was that?
That was in the 70s, 80s? 70s.
Well, how long? That was a long time ago, then.
That is a long time ago, but I'm certain they've won the Champions League since then, haven't they?
I don't think so.
I think they have. I think they've won it once.
Well, if Ajax won it, it was very much at the start of the Champions League. They've certainly not won it in recent memory.
Our man behind the glass will check that out. But
our vast phalanx of researchers will tell us.
I had a feeling. Anyway, look, getting back to... What was I talking about? I've forgotten.
You were talking about Bill Kenwright. You were talking about Bill Kenwright. You were talking about Vincent Tan.
They won the Champions League in 95.
95. That's a long time ago.
Yeah. No. Anyway, sorry. So the point I'm saying
20 years ago.
It is a long time ago. The point I'm making is...
What's going on with your mouth?
Sorry,
I'm a bit worried about you, by the way. So I want to ask you about one thing.
No.
I don't want to give away too much about our relationship off the air, but I gave you a call this afternoon just to chat through some of the things that were going on in the news and to say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because I don't want people to think that we don't have any kind of plan at all when we come on here, even though that's how it sounds. And I said I'd quite like to mention the weather, because not least that Stoke City game, which I no doubt you saw against Manchester United at the Britannia the other night.
Held up for 5 minutes.
And I said, the weather's been absolutely unbelievable. And you said to me, it's lovely here. The weather's been absolutely fine. And as I was driving up, not very long after that, I came approaching to just sort of south of London, and there was this massive rain, hailstorm, and thunder and lightning, and that kind of sheet lightning was lighting up the sky. And I literally couldn't see more than about 5 yards ahead of the car.
Amazing.
So I don't know where you've been all day, but the rain and the weather has been absolutely awful.
Well, in part of the penthouse in which I live, there are Velux windows. And
what sort of windows?
Velux.
Velux?
Yeah.
What are they?
They're windows in the roof that you pull down and that sort of thing.
Skylights,
you mean? No. They're called Velux windows.
Are they?
Yeah, they're very trendy and... massively expensive, but
how can you reach those? Do you have to stand on a chair?
No, because they're usually
or a ladder.
They're usually on parts of the roof that slope in. If you see what I mean.
All right,
that's the whole point. They're space.
No, I wouldn't know. I've never been to your lavish penthouse.
Oh, you have?
Have I?
Yeah, have you?
I've never been in there.
We went there to pick the Jag up once, and remember.
Well, there was nothing lavish about it. I thought I thought this was one of the places you rented out to some homeless people. Is that where you live?
Of course, it's
joking.
No, of course it's where I live. It's
Goodness
not part of my property portfolio. Anyway, getting back to Mr. Tan, what I was going to say, because I've now rediscovered my thinking process.
Train of thought's come back to you.
That's absolutely right. The train of thought. Yeah,
it's gone off the rails recently.
That's right, hasn't it? Yeah. What I was going to make is, Mr. Tan said he changed the colour of the shirts from blue, which had been all of the Bluebirds' existence.
Yes.
That's why I called the Bluebirds.
That's right.
Because they're kind of blue. To red, for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's a luckier colour in Asia. But
he's been proved right about that, though, because now they're in the Premier League. They're doing better than they've ever done.
Hang on. But secondly, it would have more commercial appeal in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
But I think Mr. Tan's missing a trick here. Nobody in Southeast Asia has ever heard of Cardiff City Football Club.
How do you know that?
Well, you know it for sure.
Well, Malaysia, if they've got a Malaysian owner of a football team, there must be some. We're going to be talking to somebody in Malaysia later on, hopefully, and they'll tell us that presumably there is some commercial activity going on.
I'll tell you what, if we asked of phalanx of researchers now to go and find us the chairman of the Malaysian branch of the Cardiff City Supporters Club to come on and talk to us. What time is it in Malaysia now?
They're about 8 hours ahead.
About 8 hours ahead. Well, it could be around now. It'd be 10 o'clock in the morning.
It's probably Vincent Tan's brother.
It may be, but I bet you we couldn't find one. I bet there's no Cardiff City Supporters Club.
There will be.
In Thailand,
There will be. I mean, this is a very
Malaysia,
successful businessman.
Burma,
I mean, people make fun of him,
Bangkok,
right? Hang on, calm
Vietnam.
down.
I bet there are no
none of those places are Malaysia.
Sorry?
None of those places are Malaysia.
But they're all around Malaysia.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you remember the Second World War was all about the Japanese invading Malaysia to get to Singapore?
Have you seen Malaysia?
Have I seen Malaysia?
Yeah.
What do you mean, have I seen Malaysia?
Have you ever
Do you mean
been?
have I flown over it?
No,
or something?
I've seen Malaysia. That's what I want to tell you about.
What do you mean?
Well, I was once in Singapore,
Right.
and I went to Changi Jail, which is an amazing place to
Yeah,
go.
I've been
Very,
there.
very sort of
been
emotional
there.
place.
Yeah.
But there's a point at the northern end of Singapore,
Yeah.
which is where actually the invasion force came.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through Burma and down through Malaysia, and there's a very narrow piece of water which I swam in, and I was with these sort of guides who were showing me that's Malaysia over there.
Right.
So I haven't been there, but I've seen it. That's kind of what I mean.
Excellent, yeah.
So that's why I asked you if you've seen Malaysia.
Have you seen any other countries when you've been on your travels around the world?
I've seen a lot of countries, actually.
Yeah, you've been to a few. Talking about Singapore, by the way, did you go up to Raffles for a Singapore sling?
I did.
Yeah, I did as well.
And I had the peanuts and thrown them on the floor and all that.
I had about 6 Singapore slings.
I'm not at all surprised.
Yeah, and apart from that,
I didn't find them that strong, actually.
well, the ones I got, there was a bit of a contract because you bought a glass which said, what do they call Singapore sling, yeah.
And they give you a special glass and you keep the glass. A bit of a rip-off, mate.
It's exactly what I was about to say. I couldn't work out why the next morning I woke up in my hotel bedroom and I had 6 glasses which all said Singapore sling, which I've still got, actually.
Have you still got them?
Yeah, I've still got them. So next time you come round the penthouse, I'll prepare you one. But apart from...
By the way, I'm just being told that our research so far has indicated that there are many Cardiff City supporters clubs all over Southeast Asia.
Nah, rubbish.
Not rubbish,
Well,
no,
go on, get
true.
one on the phone then. Get the guy on the phone who's chairman of the
We will.
Singapore branch of the Cardiff City Supporters Club.
Yeah.
No, the point I'm making
Mr.
is that
Sling.
apart from the gin sling, is it called the gin sling or the Singapore sling? I can't remember.
Singapore sling. It's not a gin sling, that's something else. That's what you put your arm in after you've fallen
That's
over.
right, yeah. So apart from the Singapore sling, at
There, he's
Raffles-
holding up the list of all the supporters clubs. Look, there's about 1,500 of them.
Yeah, but until we actually find one, for all we know...
Oh, yeah, there's also
for all-
rubbish on the internet. It's
for all-
not true.
For all we know, these could just be names...
Well,
written
listen,
in by somebody.
Listen, it's one
Cardiff
thing. Well, hang
City
on.
Football
Look,
Club.
it's one thing to say that Vincent Tan is an eccentric, which he is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's one thing to ridicule him for not knowing anything about football. But what this man does know about is business. He's made £1 billion over the years, making a great profit out of whatever he does. So the one thing he does know about
what
is
has this got to do with Cardiff City supporters clubs around Southeast Asia?
Because if he says that you're by having a red shirt, you're going to sell more Cardiff City, sort of memorabilia, if you like, around
I'd like
Southeast
to know
Asia.
the figures. I'd like to know how many Cardiff City shirts have been sold lately in downtown Malaysia, or downtown Bangkok,
They're all wearing them, apparently.
or downtown. What's the capital of Vietnam? I've forgotten. Downtown Hanoi. Yeah, I'd really like to know.
Ho Chi Minh City, as it was renamed.
You don't let me get to the end of my statement of you about Singapore.
Ho Chi Minh City, I'm telling you.
Ho Chi Minh City, yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, I remember as a student, all these in Nottingham, all these cranks would stand outside the University of the Trent building and chant, Ho Chi Minh, Ho Chi Minh.
Well, they're supporters of Ho Chi Minh City. They just changed their shirts
Why
to
was-
blue.
Why was Ho Chi Minh popular?
It's a long story. We haven't got time to get
A
into
left-wing
that.
revolutionary.
Yeah.
Anyway, look,
No,
getting
we
back to
haven't got time to
Singapore.
get into that. Look, we're going to have to stop now. You carry this on in a minute.
Finally, about Singapore,
Yeah.
the only thing worth doing in Singapore is drinking gin slings. Apart from that, I find it the most boring place in the world.
Yeah, as long as you don't chew gum there, you'll be all right. Mike Porky Parry and me, Mike Graham, coming up.
Crazy, but that's how it goes. Millions of people living as hoes. Yeah, but maybe.
This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. He is Mike Parry. We are the two Mikes. And there's a podcast available on iTunes every Monday and Thursday after this show. So in a few hours' time, you'll be able to hear it all, if you haven't heard it so far, on iTunes. Just download it. Mr. Mike Parry, we were talking about Malaysia and how important it is to the sort of future commercial viability of Cardiff City. Apparently, when Cardiff City got promoted, they actually got congratulated by the Prime Minister of Malaysia,
Yeah, well,
who
I'm not
tweeted out
surprised.
congratulations.
I'm not surprised if a guy from Malaysia makes it big in the world and then goes over to Britain and buys a club in the English Premier League, which is the most successful football league in the world, and then suddenly Cardiff get promoted to. I'm not surprised the Malaysian Prime Minister wanted to jump on the bandwagon. But the point is, out there in Malaysia, if Mr Tan thinks he can revolutionise Malaysia by making Cardiff City wear red shirts, I would say, despite the fact that, as you've pointed out, he's been a very successful businessman, I'd say he's a bit deluded about football, because even Brendan Rodgers last night, Mike, said this is a man who may have been successful in some areas of life but knows nothing about football. And we can see from the way he, reminding our listeners, the current story is that Malcolm Mackay has apparently received this email saying resign or
I'm going to sack you.
Yeah. That is not the way to run a football club. We all know that.
No, it's not. But, I mean, the point is that nobody should be surprised, is what I've been saying as well, because of what happened with the guy, the head of recruitment, Ian Moody, who's now at Crystal Palace. He was fired in October. And you might say that this day was bound to come, wasn't it? If you're Malcolm Mackay, you must have known that this was going to happen. And if he plays it right and plays it smart, you might find himself at West Bromwich Albion, because they're now looking at a very, very strong possibility of him moving out of Cardiff just in time for them to hire him in the Midlands.
One paper this morning says Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's going to West Bromwich Albion. But,
and yesterday, AVB was actually linked with that job as well.
He was, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Although that story seems to have gone a bit quiet in the last 24 hours.
I can't see that, because AVB regards himself as a metropolitan elitist, so to speak, in the sense that, he's part of the West London set, and also the fact that he may have picked up another £4.2 million or something like that from Spurs. You know what he got from Chelsea when he left? 11.7 million.
So he's got about 15 or so million now for failing at two clubs.
Exactly.
But, I mean, another amazing story on the back page of the Times, and it was the Times who had the West Brom story yesterday. They've got another exclusive saying that various European clubs, including Milan, AC Milan, that is, are looking at possibly appointing him there.
They're appointing who? AVB?
Yeah.
I just don't get it. I just do not get it.
But we've all known people, haven't we? I mean, in the newspaper business, there were people who had this kind of, aura about them.
Yeah.
Who, when you actually went and physically worked with them, you wondered what the mystique was all about. And one of the things that some of them had was this incredible ability to either have no responsibility for anything that ever went wrong, or absolutely no flair for anything, but somehow would kind of float about an office and talk to the right people and get the right contracts and make loads and loads of money, and then disappear off to another place and play the same trick somewhere else. I think he's one of those guys.
Yeah, well, as you quite rightly say, in Fleet Street, we know plenty of people who became millionaires through the total failure of their ability to run newspapers. I'm going to change my name, Mike. Did you know my middle name is Alan? You probably did, didn't you?
I didn't know that, actually.
Right, it is.
Alan Parry used to be a footballer, didn't he? Or a commentator.
A commentator.
That's right.
It was also my father, but God rest his soul, that was 30 years ago. What I think I'll do is, so my full name is Michael Alan Parry.
Yeah.
I'm going to change my name to Michelangelo Alain Parisi. No, seriously. And then people might start hiring me on the basis...
You don't look Italian, it has to be said.
No, well, it's a sort of continental name,
You might have to have
isn't
some
it?
plastic surgery done
If plastic surgery?
Yeah.
What for?
Well, so you make yourself look a bit more sort of Italian.
Don't be
a bit
so.
more
I
Greco-Roman.
don't want to be Italian. If somebody came to you and said, there's a chap there, André Villaboas, if you'd never met this man or heard about him before, what nationality would you say he was?
Portuguese.
Don't be ridiculous.
Well, he is Portuguese.
I know, but what I'm saying is André Villaboas, to me,
Well,
sounds...
it's not really pronounced like that, is it?
It is,
Villas-Boas.
Well, yeah, but it sounds to me more like, a sort of French name or maybe a Scandinavian name.
Well, let's face it, you're not great at the old European
German
geography.
name or something like that.
André does not sound German.
No, it sounds Scandinavian, though, doesn't it?
maybe.
Gunther, yeah. So what about that? Michelangelo, Alain Parisio. How about that?
Yeah.
How about that?
Sounds like somebody finding a Soho knocking shop.
Maybe. But then again, people would say, what an exotic name, because I think that's what
but with the exotic name,
on.
you've got to have the exotic looks. And I think part of AVB's charm is that people look at him and they think he does look like a cool, sophisticated guy. That was so funny the other night, actually, when he did that. We may have to play that out again.
Okay. Well, anyway, look, that's the Spurs
but
situation.
I'll bet you any money before the end of this season, AVB has got himself another high-paying job. Not necessarily in this country.
I don't know who'd be mad enough to hire him. If you've been given two opportunities to try and run a Premier League team, the first one ended in total disaster and humiliation at Chelsea. And that's another reason why I don't think Mr. Levy should be given the authority or the responsibility to hire a new manager. He makes such dreadful decisions in his hiring and firing of managers.
Well, this is why I'm saying, what's the difference between Joe Lewis allowing all that to go on and the club to become a laughingstock in the Premier League? If it wasn't for Cardiff City, Tottenham would be the biggest laughingstock in the Premier League right now.
Yeah, they would. would actually. You're absolutely right. And even the Tim Sherwood appointment has promoted some really, really searching inquiries into what Mr. Levy thought he was doing, giving it to a guy who wasn't even the assistant manager.
He hasn't even got his coaching badges, this guy.
He was head of the technical school, wasn't he, or something? Yeah, absolutely.
Incredible.
Absolutely.
We've got loads more to talk about. Mike Parry and Mike Graham coming up next.
We've managed to beat the record of away wins because we play comfortably away from home. And it looks like it drags the ball into our goal instead of into the opponent's goal.
See you like the sun, I like the rain. So before we go, do it all.
This is Talk Sport Extra Time. We are the two Mikes, Mike Parry and Mike Graham. We've been talking about a great many things to do with football. Time to talk about something slightly off the football calendar, though, because one of the big stories of the week, I suppose you would say, Mike, is the death of Ronnie Biggs, the great train robber, because it coincided bizarrely with the launching of that BBC show, with a drama show, I should say, which is being done from two different sides, isn't it? It's being done from the police perspective and from the train robbers' perspective themselves.
The police perspective was only last night, and I've got
I saw a bit of that, but I had to rush out before it was over.
I just saw the start of it on my Skybox because, you know, I was doing other things getting ready for this show, but I saw the previous nights from the Crooks' point of view, and they didn't come over as very attractive people at all. You know, I think they did a good job in not romanticising the crookery. Do you see what I mean? It was vicious, the attack on the train driver, and funny enough, a lot of the papers didn't empathise at all with Ronnie Biggs. A lot of them, and I think the Daily Mail was probably the leading one, said this man was a nuisance, a little petty crook who got involved in something way over his head.
And a thug, really, to the end.
Who hadn't, if he hadn't been in exile in Brazil for 30 years, probably would have spent most of that time in jail in this country anyway for successive crimes, not a big one like the great train robbery. I mean, for instance, just to illustrate how little he was aware of the savagery of the great train robbery, and when you remember famously they got together with the Sex Pistols to do a song, they were going to call it "Kosh the Driver." That was going to be the name of the title of the song. So what I'm saying is, Biggs would do anything for infamy, even if it was in such bad taste as to offend the family of a man who died after being involved in a crime which Biggs perpetrated. And
still there are those who think that he may have been the guy that dealt the fatal blow. Nobody really knows.
Absolutely right. Nobody's, this idea of the lovable rogue and all that. I mean, why, for instance, did Buster Edwards, who was a member of the gang, who had a flower store, Mike, 200 yards from where we are now in Talksport Towers, why did he eventually go and hang himself in an empty garage around the corner? It must have got on his conscience. Something about that must have got on his conscience.
Yeah,
you know
because
what I mean?
It was clearly one of those crimes that wasn't supposed to end up with anybody being hurt, really. Nobody was supposed to get hit.
And yet, you say that, but in the first part of the two-parter we just talked about, as they left Greenslade Farm, whatever it was called Greenslade, or am I thinking about a professor of journalism?
Yeah, well, there is a professor of journalism called Greenslade.
But as they left, they all picked up koshes, axes, and they were all armed. Tooled up, you'd say. And they had no qualms. If the reproduction of the moment that the two robbers got into the cab and Kosh Jack Mills, they had no hesitation about whacking him over the head very badly indeed and threatening a lot of the others with axes and all sorts of things.
But what was also interesting about that time was it was just before you and I kind of got into journalism proper, but all the guys that we worked with in New York when we first met had all been involved in the hunt for Ronnie Biggs.
Absolutely.
And, in fact, they made a movie out of it called Slip Up, which was based on the book by Tony Delano, who was a guy that we both kind of knew.
A guy we mixed with,
And funnily enough, one of our friends, Mickey Brennan, who's now off living in Costa Rica somewhere, he took the very famous picture, which was rebroadcast around all this week, of Jack Slipper coming back from Brazil, famously with an empty seat next to him on the plane.
Which should have been Biggs.
Because he'd failed to get Biggs and failed to bring him back.
Yeah, but it's an incredible story. Colin McKenzie, was it McKenzie? Colin McKenzie? Yeah. He was a reporter on the Daily Express. He was 31, but he worked in the sports department.
Yeah.
He was approached
he was a horse racing enthusiast.
Racing enthusiast, absolutely right. He was approached by somebody at a party in London who said, "I've just come back from Brazil," and you don't get to see who I met there. And he said, "Who?" He said, "Ronnie Biggs." He said, "Don't be ridiculous. He's the world's most wanted fugitive." Right. He said, "No." He said, he told me he was Ronnie Biggs in a bar, and he said he wanted to do a deal to come back. Did I know any journalists? And you're a journalist, so what do you want to know about it? Anyway, the undercover operation, they went out there and that kind of stuff. When they got there, and Biggs changed his mind, didn't want to come back. Slipper of the yard turns up, and then he finds his girlfriend's pregnant and he can stay. It was an amazing story, but absolutely right. I mean, funny enough, one man who was involved big was Michael O'Flaherty.
Yes.
Mike was a great friend of mine at the Express, a real gentleman, a twinkle in his Irish eyes and all that. Got married 4 times because he couldn't resist.
His last marriage was to some woman in the African bush, I think, wasn't it?
It was an African princess, and they lived in what the nearest to a mud hut type thing, you know. And unfortunately, Michael died there. It was after he went over to Africa in his later years. He was over 70 to do voluntary service overseas, met a woman in her 20s and married her.
And by that time, he dried out, hadn't he? Because he used to be a bit of a drinker. As many of your friends have been in the past.
Well, I mean...
Well, we've turned into Sven now.
well, Mike was more than a drinker. Mike was an alcoholic. Yeah. And he told me some famous... I mean, I've spent time with him in Ireland, and that's not a good place for an alcoholic to be, particularly if you're Irish, you know. The hotel we used to stay on St Stephen's Green, I mean, he used to wreck the bar. He was an Oliver Reed type wrecker. Yeah. But on one occasion, he deliberately hit on a nurse... Because he was a gentleman and all that kind of stuff, but the nurse had access to the drugs cabinet at the hospital where she supplied him with this drug, which he used to inject into his liver before going out drinking, in the mad belief that it would protect his liver from
injected it into his liver.
He would stick it into the area of his body where he thought his liver was, right? And he'd inject himself in the car park of the pub before going in the pub and getting lassoed on half a bottle of whiskey or something like that.
And then coming out and driving home, presumably.
Well, I've no idea.
People did that in those days.
I don't know. But but the big thing, I'm glad that people have put it into perspective. He wasn't a hero or anything like that. And in fact, it was
some of the obits though were a little bit more kind of friendly to him than others. You said the Daily Mail one wasn't, and it wasn't. But I mean, one of the Telegraph was quite sympathetic to him.
Was that the proper obituary on the obituary page? Yeah. Well, I sometimes wonder about those and where they come from. But the reports of his death I'm talking about were the accounts of his life, and his life was a tawdry life. It was it was a shocking. Life. I can't imagine somebody saying to me, you can't go home for the rest of your life for the next 30 years. That wouldn't suit me at all. But there you go. He got himself involved and he was in Brazil, and in those days, Brazil was a far more exotic place in a way than it is now, because you couldn't just fly to Brazil in the same way that you can now. But I wanted to talk to you about that, because obviously British Airways, and I was picked up by somebody who rang in earlier and said, you're absolutely contradicting yourself, because, of course, what you're saying is that the England team should be flown by British Airways, exactly the same as football clubs having colours that shouldn't be changed. I don't see the connection between those two things at all. But aside from that, what's wrong with British Airways? Why can't they fly England out to the World Cup? Well, according to the reports I read, and I haven't spoken to British Airways or the FA, I went to an FA reception this week, actually. Very nice. Met Roy Hodgson.
Oh, that's nice.
And
how did you find him?
Very amiable as usual. My old friend Bevo, Adrian Bevington, the head of the FA. But
are you still kind of welcome with open arms when you go back to the FA?
Yes, absolutely.
Are they very grateful for what you did for them during a difficult time or something like that?
Very much so. I think that I created the sort of the media structure that is there today.
Really?
20 years on.
It's not working very well now.
Well, it works very well. In fact, we're having a reunion next year. The first 4 of us who set it up.
Oh yeah.
That was 4 of us then, including a secretary. So there was David Davis, myself, there was Claire, and there was Joe, and there was just the 4 of us. Yeah. And today, I mean, there's 64 people in that department or something like that.
Where are you having it? You're not having it in Brazil, are you?
No, in Langens in London, what we call the Footballers' Restaurant.
Yes, that sounds like a bad day out.
Yeah, but anyway, getting back to British Airways and all that. Now, they say they can't. I don't understand.
How can they not have a plane this far in advance that they can just say, we're going to tailor this and we're going to give it to the England team?
They say it would cost 10 million quid to restructure and refit everything. I can't believe that I totally agree with you, mate. They haven't got a spare jumbo jet for one flight to Brazil. But anyway, look, they say they haven't. They're a commercial outfit. I don't blame them. But I don't see why there's a huge fuss happening, because when we all went to South Africa for the World Cup there, that was all flown by Virgin anyway. Virgin flew them there, and Virgin apparently have now picked up the opportunity. But think about this, Mike, as a marketing exercise, OK? And you won't find a bigger fan of English football than me, the England football team. But how many times have you and I witnessed the famous shot, which is always the same, of Alan Shearer, or whoever the England captain is at the time, leaning out the pilot's window.
Yeah, leaning out the cockpit, as it's called.
Waving a flag at St George as the plane starts off down
Taxis.
the... Taxis
You're not
off.
too familiar with the terms on aviation, are you?
No.
It's called the cockpit. When the plane first moves away from the gate, it's
That's
called
right.
taxiing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Take
From the
off,
apron.
Take
From the
off.
apron.
Take off is when it starts to it's ascent into the air.
Yeah.
And landing is when it comes down on the other side.
Yeah,
that's normally when you're completely comatose.
No. My favourite moment is when
You've
that
probably
sign...
never witnessed a landing ever, have you?
No, probably not. It's when that sign goes off saying, seatbelts now, you can let them go. That's a signal to get the stewardess lady to get the glasses out. But anyway, there you go. Point
Glad
is,
you said that.
Yeah. The point is it a great marketing exercise for British Airways, particularly as everybody's talking down England's expectations in Brazil?
Well, I think it is because no matter how England do in Brazil, the lead up to it's going to be very exciting. The departure to a place which is considered to be like South Africa was quite a long way away is going to be great. And I mean, I'm not at all pessimistic about England's chances.
No,
actually.
I'm
I
not.
I think they'll get out of the group.
I would love to see it. I would love them to land there in a British Airways jumbo, with the tail fin showing our flag and all that. I really would love it. But this brings me on to another of my bugbears.
Yeah.
What we should never have scrapped Concorde, because Concorde was made for those sort of occasions.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time Concorde went to JFK and landed there? It caused a riot. People from all over Manhattan were heading out.
And it was such a beautiful plane. I mean, I
course
used to
it
play
was.
golf down at Royal Mid-Surrey Golf Club, which you probably have been a couple of times.
Yes.
And a load of us. And every night at something like 10 to 6 in the summer evening, you would see Concorde coming
come
into
over.
a beautiful plane.
And you hear the bang.
Yeah.
Well, on the...
We didn't hear the bang when it was landing.
No. Well, in my roof garden, in my penthouse in Surrey, right, every night at that time, because Royal Mid-Surrey's not very far away from where I live, I'd
It
hear
wasn't flying at the speed of sound at that time.
I promise you, Mike, I would hear the crack, and then I'd look up and I would see the beautiful white bird.
You're making that up now.
No, I'm not.
No, you're making that up because
no.
it would not break the sound barrier over London.
Mike,
it wasn't allowed to.
I would hear it. Well, it had very distinctive engines or something,
It
but
did.
you would
It
hear
wasn't
the
a sonic
plane.
boom you were hearing.
Well, I didn't say. I said you hear the crack. I didn't say a sonic boom, did I? You've just mentioned sonic boom. I didn't say anything about
No,
sonic
you were
boom.
inferring it was a sonic boom.
You oaf and trying to put words in my mouth, and you'd look up and you'd see it there. So that would be the moment, wouldn't it? When Mrs. Thatcher used to go to America, she'd often take the Concorde, and it was a great national symbol for us, and it was only because of that accident in Charles de Gaulle.
It was a terrible accident, yeah.
That we had to scrap it. But I mean,
But the other thing about planes that's been in the news this week is that British Airways have come out and said actually now you can all use your gadgets on the planes, your mobile phones and all that stuff for years that they told us might interfere with the navigational controls. And I suspected it was all rubbish because a few months back lots of airlines have now said if you're in first class, you can use as many gadgets as you want.
Well,
so it's
why-
only
why
the
do
people
you
in GOAT class that aren't allowed to use them.
why do you think it was imposed as a ban then?
I just think they didn't want people to use anything other than what you had to pay for, which was basically, their own headphones and their own on. You see what I mean?
Good thinking. So what you're saying,
See,
you
I
take
think
your
like Vincent
laptop on
Tan.
board and you start watching their films, you're not paying for the hire
not
of...
paying for the headphones.
I've got... That's not a bad...
It's a bit like why they don't want you to bring your own bottle of wine on board.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't do that, would you?
Really?
No, nobody. No.
You take bottles of wine in all sorts of places.
I know. I've seen
taken bottles of wine on trains before.
I've seen people loaded up with the duty free stuff on a plane.
When I was younger,
and sipping from bottles of whiskey and all sorts of
when I was
absolutely disgusting
when
behaviour.
I was younger and I didn't have very much money, and I used to travel transatlantic quite a lot because I used to go and see the woman who was going to become my wife. I used to always take my own alcohol with me and just buy orange juice.
And what, in the form of a duty-free bottle of vodka or something?
Well, no, I just take a bottle of vodka with me.
Yeah, but you get it in duty-free, obviously.
Probably, yeah.
You
but
get
I
it
mean,
cheap, yeah.
probably. But
That's
then,
pretty
but then,
disgusting
But then,
behaviour,
because
I
I couldn't
have to
afford to have like £3 a drink or £5 a drink or something, so I just used the orange juice, which was free, and then just drink screwdrivers all the way across the Atlantic.
Yeah, so just say, can I have a few free orange juices, please? And you're slurring your words.
They wonder why
thinking,
I was slurring my words.
Yeah, because you've clearly this orange juice affecting your brain. I'm surprised at some stage and say, no, I'm sorry, sir, no more orange juice for you. It's having a very strange effect
I have been
upon
cut
you.
off on planes before, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, since we're talking about slurring the words, what about the bad news from Everton about your player Doulafou?
Doulafou, yeah. It is bad news, that, because he now could be out anything between 6 to 8 weeks, but he's a very young boy, and you've got to make sure that injury heals. He's gone back to his parent club. He's gone back to Barcelona to have the lot treated.
Good news is that
Barcelona.
while he's out, you can practice the pronunciation of his name.
No, and I think I've told you this before. Everton have a great relationship with Barcelona.
Well, they do now that David Moyes has left.
Well, I'm not sure of that. I mean, look...
Well, who came from Barcelona when Moyes was there?
Barcelona.
You can't just keep pronouncing the name ridiculously. Who
I
came
think-
from Barcelona when Moyes was there?
Well, there is one very obvious fact here, Mike, and that is our new manager happens to be Spanish, right?
So you're saying
Barcelona
nobody-
is based in Spain. So I think there could be a connection. You
so
got
there-
it? Can you
so
put
that's-
those two facts
that's-
together?
So that's what I'm telling you. Now they've got a relationship with Barcelona because Roberto Martinez is there. When David Moyes was there, they did not have a relationship with Barcelona.
Well, yeah, but I don't remember the last time Scotland and Spain signed a peace treaty, which, meant that you could swap labour forces
Grasping
around.
at straws now. What the hell are you talking about?
You know what I mean? David Moyes is Scottish, so, when Davy goes Barcelona, he's talking a completely different language to are they Catalans in Barcelona?
They are.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Yeah, so the Catalan dialect, which is a strange version of Spanish,
It is.
and the Scottish dialect, which is a very strange version of the English language.
No,
I
you
just
might
don't
say
see.
that.
Well, it is. It's
It's
true.
It's just an accent. It's a different accent. It's not a different
Yeah.
dialect.
It is a dialect, of course it is. Geordie's a dialect. Merseyside, Scouse is a dialect. The Brummie accent's a dialect. Of course it is. Don't you know what a dialect is?
Yes, of course I know what a dialect is.
Honest
It's
to
not a
God,
different-
Mike,
it's not-
sometimes
It's not a
your
different
social
version of English.
Your social, of course it is. Your social knowledge of this country is very limited, in my
Well,
view.
let's have another go at pronouncing his name then, De La Feur.
Deulofeu.
He's struggling with that surname. Deulofeu.
See, Deulofeu, I told you.
De La
Deulofeu.
Feur.
Yes, but he's pronouncing it with a Spanish
De La
accent.
Feur.
Deulofeu.
I've got
Fell.
it.
It's fell at the end.
It's
Fell.
not. It's Deulofeu. Believe
He's
me.
struggling with that surname.
Believe me, I know these things. If you're in Spain now and you said Deulofeu, everybody know exactly what you're talking about. If you said
Deulofeu.
Deulofeu, they wouldn't.
Yeah, that's Scouser from Everton.
Deulofeu.
I don't think so.
Now,
yeah.
before I let you go,
Right.
I wanted to ask you about Jack Wilshere because
Yeah.
he's been given the 2-match ban.
Yes.
That's been upheld, which I think is probably quite right, considering the fact that he gave the finger to the fans who were abusing him. We're going to talk a little bit about that later on in the show. Think it's right or not?
I don't think he should have been banned. Honest to God, he was doing basically what football fans do to each other. And actually,
Yeah, but he's supposed to give an example, isn't he?
I know he is, but whenever I've been in a crowd and I've seen one of the opposition players getting all frustrated and giving the finger, all the crowd do is laugh. They don't suddenly say, let's all fight each other now because Jack Wilshere's given us the finger gesture. They laugh. And it's part, in my view, of the rivalry of football. And although I'm a big supporter of the FA and the job they do, I wish that Jack Wilshere had not been punished for what I think is a very mild gesture.
So you think you should have got away with it. Mike Porky Parry will be back with me on Monday night. The Two Mikes podcast will be available in a few hours' time on iTunes.